comply with is meant to restore order on the roads and at best stop the deaths. But is that what the operators decided to protest against enforcement wanted to see go on? Interior CS Fred Matiang'i says they will not relent, the blackmail notwithstanding.
This is for the good of everyone. It's for the good of those who have invested in the sector. It's for the good of the public. It's for the good of everyone. None of us would like to lose their relatives on the road. None of us would like to invest in a business where you have no returns or where your returns are depressed. We are doing this because collectively all of us must agree. Sasa, let us now go back to order because the way we have been operating is untenable. We can't continue this way. And we are going to insist on this. I've been told that some operators have decided to withdraw their vehicles. That's fine. They can keep them at home as long as they want because we are not changing our position.
Although the short night shall be speaking to National Assembly Transport Committee Chair David Kosing, Kenya Motorists Association Chairman Peter Murima, and Matatu Welfare Association Chairman Dixon Bogo is joining us to the show live from our city center studios. But as usual, before we hear from them, let me bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Nuna, to give us the legal perspective of the transport crisis. Sophia, good evening.
Good evening, Michelle. So this has been quite a day for motorists, for passengers. Early morning, we saw those scenes from different parts of Nairobi and other parts of the country. Motorists giving lifts to pedestrians who are stranded. Matatu saying that they are not in agreement with the timeline that was given to what is largely described as a reinforcement of the quote-unquote Mishuki rules, this road safety and transport rules that have pretty much been an issue of debate, with the sector players arguing that they should have been given more time, saying they do not agree with some elements of them. But let's understand a little bit more of what really has transpired, because what we understand is that there was never a time that the Mishuki rules were not to be enforced. So why is it this hullabaloo? If they were in place all this time, then why is the sector, the Matatu, the PSVs up in arms and pulling off services off the roads that we've seen fares hiked in different parts of the country, and many had to walk to their places of work or wherever else it is they were making their way to earlier this morning and throughout the day. Steve Ogola is an advocate. He joins me now. Thank you for making time for the big story. Let's begin with the whole debate around that reintroduction tag on the Mishuki rules. Is it a reintroduction, or were they there all along and that just the agencies, the authorities paused or just stopped enforcing them?
I think, Sophia, the road safety regulations or rules, otherwise popularly known as Mishuki rules, have been in place since 2004. There was a brief interlude when the High Court stopped the implementation so that some procedural and substantive questions can be answered. But in 2012, Parliament passed the National Transport and Safety Authority (NTSA) Act, which reenacted the road safety rules, the Mishuki rules, under Section 4 of the NTSA Act. So they have been in force since 2012 again, but we could say that government, in its lackadaisical approach to implementation of the rules generally, have not been enforcing these rules. But if you want a short answer, yes, these laws have been part of our law since 2012, and they could also be traced backwards since 2004, when they were first introduced.
When this matter was taken to court and issues were raised about legality of some sections of it, what were the issues? I know you have read the judgment. What were the issues raised and have they been dealt with?
When the Matatu Owners Association and the Matatu Welfare Association moved to the High Court before Justice J.B. Ojwang, as he then was, they challenged the Mishuki rules on two grounds. One, there was the question of the substantive provisions of the laws themselves, of the regulation, but then there was also the question of procedure. On the substance, the Matatu Owners Association, basically the operators and the drivers and the owners and operators, what they challenged, they said that under the Transport Licensing Act, of the previous act, that under which these regulations were enacted, did not confer the minister, as he then was, Honorable John Michuki, with powers to formulate or maybe enact regulations without taking them to Parliament. So that was the procedural questions, but then also the substantive provisions of this act was that initially the requirements, especially the requirement that Matatus are defined in law to mean vehicles that have a capacity of under 25 passengers, between 4 to 27 to 25 passengers. Those are what the law defines as matatus. Otherwise, a vehicle with a capacity, a public service vehicle with a capacity of above 25, that's a bus. So now, if you look at the old act, well, the law provided that taxis were required to have a continuous yellow line. The drivers were required to display their images, and then they have badges and also have uniform for purpose of identification. What Michuki did was to lift the provisions that govern the taxi cabs to be applicable also in Matatus. So they challenged that because according to the Matatu Owners Association and Matatu Welfare Association, they said those provisions referred to taxi drivers, but you can take that again. Refers to taxi drivers, not necessarily Matatus. Well, the High Court said that insofar as the rules and regulations formulated were meant to promote public order and safety, they could apply. So the substantive question was well answered. On the procedure, the court agreed with the Matatu Owners Association and the Welfare Association that yes, if you needed to promulgate this kind of or enact this kind of regulations, then there was need for parliamentary input, because that is what was provided for in the old act. But then the court gave the government 6 months to reorganize these laws to make sure that if there was compliance, that with the procedure, compliance was had. The government actually did an addendum to the legal notice number 161 of 2003, which introduced 2004, which introduced the Michuki rules. They did a substantive amendment to the legal notice, incorporating some of the issues that were raised in the judgment. So since that time, enforcement ought to have happened, but enforcement did not happen. What happened also in 2012, when Parliament passed the National Transport and Safety Authority, they lifted the entire Michuki rules and reenacted them under Section 4 of the NTSA Act. If you look at the NTSA Act, the authority is mandated with the function of developing and implementing road safety measures and strategies. Now, what is now popularly known as the Michuki rules. So yes, in terms of procedure and in terms of substance, these laws have been enforced since 2004, but there was some laxity in terms of enforcement.
All right. So let's look at it this way. We have seen hundreds of Kenyans lose their lives in road accidents. The most recent, biggest numbers we've seen in recent history, 58, 10, and the Minister Interior, CS Matiang'i, talking about taking responsibility. Today we've seen all the CSs come out, him, the Transport CS, the IG Police, talking about this will really work this time around. In your view, as a lawyer, seeing as we are saying, the implementation had not stopped. The laws were still in place, but now it's appearing like they've been reintroduced, and yet that is not the case. Who has dropped the ball? And yet there's a real question around the police and the role they play in that. Some of the Matatu industry players are arguing the corruption issue, that they use this to now be able to get as much money as possible to give a go-ahead to whoever will give money.
Well, what cannot be doubted is the knee-jerk reaction by government in the approach to management of the Matatu or the public transport sector. Because you see, these laws and these regulations have been enforced, they have been in place. But enforcement has been less than perfect. The way the government has approached the implementation of the Michuki rules since 2004, there was so much energy and so much, they promoted these rules that as if they were really necessary to bring order. But then, after they were allowed to make some adjustments, enforcement for the last 10 years or so, we can say has been very laxed and has been uninspiring, and the Matatu operators and owners have taken cue and now disregarded or completely abandoned enforcement of these laws. So you see, when there's a crisis, a lot of guys losing their lives on the road, then the government wakes up and they reimagine this. Actually, we have these rules. It's just that we've never really implemented them. I think it's a strong indictment on the approach to governance. This kind of knee-jerk reaction that you wait for a crisis, to occur before you can start implementing the laws that are enforced does not inspire confidence. And in fact, it is what is reinforcing impunity. Police officers have always been on the road. In fact, for a long time, even NTSA have always been on the road. They have not been enforcing this regulation. Nothing new has been reintroduced except the old regulations as they were. But you see now, because there was an accident that claimed, lives of many Kenyans, over 50, and there was the subsequent public outcry, the government then realized that we have been failing. I think the best way it ought to have done is to admit the failure on their part, apologize to Kenyans and the families that lost their loved ones. Then, in terms of implementation, since these rules have been gradually ignored, in as much as you want them implemented abruptly, there are practical challenges because they relate to speed governance, they relate to speed seatbelts, they relate to recalibration of the vehicles, they relate to repainting, of the continuous yellow line, uniform, badges, all these. Are we sure that the Matatu owners and operators could achieve all this within a space of 2 weeks?
So then let me ask you this. Do they then have space and room for a legal challenge? In light of what you said, that do they have enough time to do all of this and comply realistically? So can they move to court and say, we need more time?
Yes, they could. And the critical balance is this. Well, the law is sacrosanct. But also, if you look at the public benefit measures, the intention is not to disrupt or to cripple public transport system. The intention is to ensure safety and security of road users, those who use and rely on the public transport system. So if you are reinforcing or you are reenacting or implementing these regulations afresh, there was need for consultation, and I said enforcement ought to have been prefaced by an honest admission that there was laxity, failure on the part of government. Then an admission on the part of operators and Matatu owners that as a consequence of government failure, they have also ignored these regulations and they have been either been operating as if these laws don't exist. Now, we need timelines. If you say implement within 2 weeks, how have you arrived at 2 weeks? Was there consultation with the Matatu owner? They are raising a practical sense question. You cannot waive the sanctity of the law and tell Matatu owners and operators that, listen, the law has always been there since 2004, reenacted since 2012. So if you have not been complying, well, that's up to you. It's easier to say we are waiving the sanctity of the law. So you can't waive non-enforcement as an excuse to disobey the law. If you make that argument, it sounds logical. But in terms of the practical reality, Matatu owners, they can have a case and say, fine, we know these road safety measures were intended to improve order, in the public transport sector, but there was laxity on both ends. What we are saying now is that let Matatu owners and operators be given time. What is sufficient time? The framing of sufficient time can only happen across the table. Consultation, concurrence is necessary, without which nothing is possible. And they can raise that question in terms of Article 47, fair administrative action, in terms of Article 10 of the Constitution, public consultation, and participation. I think it is possible to injunct implementation of this, not because of the substance of the law, but because of the manner, the abrupt nature in which they are being implemented.
Many thanks. Advocate Steve Ogola with us here on The Big Story. And Michelle, it has been quite a day, and we've been seeing those images of a walking nation, as it has been described in some quarters. And just a quick update on what we've also been able to hear from the various leaders, the CSs. So CS Matiang'i earlier on, talking about the cartels and targeting those that wait in the various bus stations to collect money, saying that that should not be the case. If you want to run and operate Matatu, you should be able to do that, not indebted to someone, not thinking you must pay. So there is a realization that there is a problem of cartels in this sector that has had their way for a very long time. However, how the Ministry of Transport is looking at curing this problem, at least in the interim, with this strike of the Matatu operators, is saying that Nairobians, especially in specific, should use the train. So CS Macharia Transport was talking about an increase from 12 to 18 of the train service around different parts of Nairobi. However, what's important to note on that is that they barely cover 50%. So what about the other 50 that do not have the luxury of using a train to their various places of operation? But lastly, the Inspector General of Police also spoke about this, saying that all those who have pulled out their services in this time, and yet they have licenses, they should be operating, but in standing with this decision to stay out of business, action will be taken against them. So we'll wait to see what will play out. And interesting also will be to see if in fact they do choose, that is the Matatu PSV public service vehicles, to take legal action to ask for more time, more engagement on this, seeing as truly, as it stands now, there is also that laxity that has been seen on the part of government in that these laws have been in place. So it's not that they've just been enacted and that everybody needs to toe the line. There was also a dropping of the ball on that side, not just with the public service vehicles. So let's see how all this plays out, Michelle.
All right, thank you, Sophia. Well, let's take a quick look at that law that has caused a stir in the transport sector, as well as the instant fines recently introduced for petty offenders. And that is the law there, the National Transport and Safety Act of 2013, prescribing that PSV vehicles must be fitted with speed limiters or speed governors. And for small PSV vehicles there, it is a limit of 80 kilometers per hour. The act also prescribes that PSV vehicles must be fitted with functional seat belts as well as a yellow continuous line. The act also goes ahead to prescribe that PSV drivers as well as conductors are required to wear uniforms and PSV badges as described by law, and also requiring that both drivers and conductors prominently display their photos as prescribed by law. All right, the traffic offences and penalties that come along with the NTSA Act of 2013 are as follows. Identification plates placed incorrectly on the car will attract penalties, a penalty of 10,000 shillings. Obstruction on the roads will attract a penalty of 10,000 shillings as well. Driving on a pedestrian walkway will attract a penalty of 5,000 shillings. Failure to obey traffic signs, that attracting a penalty of 3,000 shillings, and driving while using a mobile phone will attract a penalty of 2,000 shillings. These, remember, are instant fines that have been implemented there in this NTSA Act of 2013. It goes ahead also to give fines for vehicles without seatbelts, and those will have to pay 10,000 shillings per seat. Failure to fit prescribed speed governors as well will attract a penalty of 10,000 shillings. Driving without a valid driving license will attract a penalty of 7,000 shillings, while motorcycles riding without protective gear will attract a penalty of 1,000 shillings. Now, in terms of exceeding the speed limit, as the speed limit governors have been fitted, and as exceeding the speed limit by 1 to 5 kilometers per hour will attract a penalty of 500 shillings. Exceeding the speed limit by 6 to 10 kilometers per hour, attracting a penalty of 3,000 shillings. Exceeding the limit by 11 to 15 kilometers per hour, attracting a penalty of 6,000 shillings, while exceeding by 16 to 20 kilometers per hour will give you a penalty of 10,000 shillings. And these are the laws that have caused quite a stir in the transport sector, as the Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i there says it is all systems go. Well, on the show tonight, like I mentioned, I will be speaking to National Assembly Transport Committee Chair David Kosing. Also joining us tonight is the Kenya Motorist Association Chairman Peter Murima, as well as Matatu Welfare Association Chairman Dixon Bogwa, who is joining the show from our city center studios. Gentlemen, many thanks for your time. Mr. Kosing, I'd like to begin with you. The National Assembly Transport Committee has endorsed the ongoing crackdown on public service vehicles. The question, however, is why this endorsement comes now when these laws have been in effect or in place for years. What does the National Assembly Transport Committee envision that will be different to ensure a sustainable enhancement of road safety laws in the country?
I thank you for that question. And to begin with, we are supporting it. And the reason why we are supporting it is that we are the ones, or National Assembly is the one, particularly my committee, is the one that raised the red flag. You may remember in September this year, we did an audit covering July and August, and we were asking ourselves what went wrong on the road. We were doing an audit on road accidents, and we realized that only month of July and September, we lost 507 people. 507 people died. And we realized that we lost a Kenyan every day, of all those 2 months. It was terrible.
Right.
And my committee said it cannot be business as usual. And that's why we engaged a number of other stakeholders, including Inspector General, the Ministry of Transport. And we were motivated by the fact that His Excellency the President, removed NTSA from the road and brought in traffic.
Right.
And we are now doing a follow-up. And we raised the red flag and we told Inspector General it is not going to be business as usual because we're losing more Kenyans.
Right.
And the reason why then they are going this way, we are supporting them. We are watching them. They are the implementers. They came to National Assembly. They listen to us. They are doing their work and we are listening to them. Number two, the reason why it's now being done, because many questions Kenyans are asking themselves, why not that time? It was 2012, Matiang'i rules and so on. I'm telling them two things. Number one, of course, we are going towards Christmas. And remember what happened last Christmas. We lost a lot of Kenyans.
Right.
And therefore, it is timely. In my view, I am supporting them and I'm saying it's timely.
And the timeliness seems to be the problem because the conversation began after the Fort Tenan accident where 58 people lost their lives. And again, many saying that was a knee-jerk reaction because transport enforcement agencies have failed on their job on enforcing these laws that have been in place for more than 5 years. So what is different now? What has Parliament put in place now that will ensure sustainable enforcement of these laws?
What we have done, and which of course is now in the table of Inspector General and Minister of Transport. What we have done, what we have realized is that the Matiang'i rules and the rules we are talking about now, they are not self-enforcing. They depend on a traffic policeman, they depend on a number of things. Number two, when you look at that accident, the worst accident this year that occurred in Fort Tenan that killed more than 56 people, that car was not licensed to travel at night. It was overcrowded. But there was policemen on the road. And again, coming back, there was somebody who released that car. That is the SACCO and the CEO. And that is why we have come up with a proposed amendment. We have asked the Inspector General to have 2 weeks to look at it and bring back to us. We have asked the Minister of Transport to have a look at it and bring us back to us. And what we are saying is that we want to make the so-called Matiang'i rules, the popularly known as Matiang'i rules, self-regulating. And therefore, we want to take SACCO owner to bear or to take the greatest responsibility so that when an accident occurs, like what happened, then we should ask ourselves, how did that car move from the yard to transport people and go and kill people in Fort Tenan? It was released by a SACCO CEO. Where were the policemen? How many roadblocks were on the road? Why did they see that car was not supposed to travel at night? And therefore, what has been missing in this country is that where is the policeman, where is the SACCO man? And therefore, the law we are bringing in place very soon will take the police to jail and will also take the SACCO owner and the CEO who released that car that killed people to jail.
All right.
That's what has been missing.
Well, let's bring in Peter Murima. He's the chairman of the Kenya Motorists Association. Many thanks for joining us on The Big Story. Earlier today, the Federation of Public Service Operators reached a consensus with the Ministry of Transport. But before that, that same federation, which is the umbrella body for public service operators in the country, had ordered for a nationwide withdrawal of public service vehicles from the roads in the wake of these laws that are expected to enhance road safety laws. So the question being asked tonight is, why is it such an arduous task for Matatus to obey traffic laws?
Okay, yes. What we have been having on our roads is that there's a lot of chaos. And these started by some relaxation of the laws. We used to have very stringent rules which were being enforced by the traffic commandant plus the NTSA. But this was relaxed, and actually there was a decree that our public transport vehicles were given some leeway to do some graffiti, but that was taken out of context.
Right.
The graffiti was extended than what the president had ordered. So we started having add-ons on the vehicles, and then everything went haywire. Started having overlapping, driving against traffic, using blinding lights, using protruding rims, using blaring horns, blaring exhaust, and then the road turned into a mad place. So when this happened, everyone else now, plus private motorists joined in the fray of overlapping, driving against traffic, and this is where the rain started beating us. So now we started having road carnage, which now is claiming a lot of innocent Kenyans who trust their lives on the government and the operators. So when now we start killing those very innocent, helpless Kenyans on our roads, yet a woman and a child in that vehicle relies on the goodwill of the operator, the goodwill of the government. But we are happy that the Fortenan accident has jolted the government into action, and we hope that this will be sustained. And we are supporting the CS, Honorable Matiang'i, because his resolve actually has brought together all government agencies, and we believe that nobody would support or deny that we need rule and order and sanity to creep back as soon as possible.
All right, and initially, Matatu owners, and the entire association were jittery about these laws. What would you say was the initial bone of contention? Some had mentioned that these instant funds and the fact that these laws had been in place, and we've seen this rejuvenation of the implementation of these laws now would mean that it would be leeway for corrupt police officers to bring in corruption in the wake of instant fines.
Yes, we know that our operators, the public transport operators, the targets that are set, we need to change this system, because the target that the operator needs to learn so that they can make a profit is so high. So you'll find that the drivers and the crew, and actually the owner, has to run, because these vehicles are in perpetual payment of loans. Our vehicles are not made to rust. So now this involves now a ring of cartel who benefit from now the lawlessness. So there is the corruption, which you are calling corruption, but actually it's blood money, which is corrected, because it's blood money because it ends up killing people. So what we need is that we need to change the system so that we can build buses that last. We can have employees who are on salary, not on targets and paid every day in the evening. This makes them learn amok and learn across the road as if there is no other road users, or other road users has been bullied.
All right.
Yeah, and
all right.
It's very dangerous.
Well, let's bring in Dixon Bugwa. He is the chairman of the Matatu Welfare Association. Dixon, good evening. It was a walking nation for the better part of the day, but towards the end of the day, the Federation of Public Service Operators apologized to Kenyans, saying they will be back on the roads. Will it be a similar situation tomorrow?
Well, thank you for inviting me to this program. And first, I must say, this is the withdrawal of the vehicles from our roads from today was in the pretense that they were going to really be prepared for the compliance with the Michuki rules, as it were. And indeed, most of them have been in the garage, especially those that had not complied. The others that had complied did not turn up because we say this is a solidarity matter, and then they had to show that kind of unity for a purpose. And since yesterday, we have been having a note that the OP is really looking for us so that at least we are able now to discuss this issue on one-to-one, on a round table, and agree on the way forward into this. And we are happy that this afternoon, the Office of the President, particularly the Ministry of Interior, did really call us, and we sat over these things and agreed on the various issues that we had raised.
That is Dixon Bugwa, chairman of the Matatu Welfare Association. We're coming back with this conversation. This is The Big Story. Stay with us.